Dr. Martin Scott, CTO and Senior Vice President of Rambus. Just a few words about Dr. Martin Scott. Martin joined Rambus in 2007, leading the new business efforts, and now leads the company's platform development efforts. He is responsible for Rambus long-range research and development. Martin was Vice President and General Manager for IO Solutions at Agilent Technologies before. He started his professional career at HP Labs, holding a variety of management positions at HP, including ASIC Business Unit Manager. Martin earned his bachelor's degree at Rice University and has both master's and PhD from Stanford. His topic today is titled Making Chip to Cloud Security for IoT Real. Welcome, Martin.
Good morning, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I certainly cannot claim to be an expert on all the diverse topics that will be discussed in the next couple of days, but I do hope to introduce some practical experience that we've gained, some opportunities that we see, and share some perspectives, one of which came up this morning with the claim that IoT is hard. I couldn't agree more. It's also an enormous opportunity for us all, with new opportunities to collaborate and partner. Private, public sector, company to company, cloud companies and semiconductor companies. One of the most exciting things that I've seen of late are the unusual and new connections people have made to provide solutions. It's a combination of leading edge innovation and sometimes the stunning lack of common sense. So with that, I will start. So we've been working in security in a number of different vertical markets that you recognize by these emblems here. The fascinating thing about IoT is, in fact, it often encompasses specific vertical market requirements that are represented in the semiconductor industry, the auto industry, space, content protection. So IoT is this amalgam of diverse technologies that need to seamlessly interact, make autonomous decisions, and those decisions not only translate to financial transactions often, but control critical public infrastructure where the lack of a proper autonomous command can cause great harm. This is a big responsibility for all of us who work in the IoT field. And of course, in part because there's a lack of common sense, and in part the adversaries are getting stronger and stronger, IoT attacks are certainly on the rise. This is certainly in no way a complete list of prominent attacks, but they're representative of some of the ones that we've seen, particularly over the last year. If you think of the millions of connected IP cameras in China, in London, throughout the world, it is quite common to have these IP cameras connected with no security whatsoever. So not only is the geolocation or the precise time clock uncorrelated potentially through an adversary intervention on these cameras, it's really a big problem. So when I said lack of common sense, maybe that's a bit too strong, but according to ABI research, which we use a lot, almost 70% of the commonly connected IoT devices are unsecured, meaning they have absolute open back doors or sometimes even open front doors in order to make an attack. I'll introduce here in the next couple of minutes the idea that not only do we have the device itself to protect against control, but we also have cloud intervention to protect, where the denial of service or the lack of high availability of that service brings the complete value of the connectivity of IoT down in the first place. So what do we need? We certainly don't claim to have the only solution. There are many very good solutions starting to emerge in the industry. But I will introduce the idea that to secure IoT requires quite a systemic and ecosystemic view of the problem. That starts in silicon, the earlier the better, when thinking about the requirements for security, the injection of keys, the protection of circuits, the protection against the use of countermeasures to protect against very common physical attacks like differential power analysis, all the way to the securing of applications that depend on that secure connectivity layer and the value of the analytics that are going to be used to actually produce information. Part of the special sessions here today, we'll talk about analytics. Well, the value of those analytics will only be high if the trust of the data that it's used as an input is in fact strong. So connected endpoints, it's all about the endpoints. There's a big conventional infrastructure in place with good common practices to secure the cloud, to secure networks. Certainly we're here in Bangalore with a rich history of work in information technology. So the IT world is used to dealing with some conventional connectivity. It gets much, much more complicated and much, much more interesting for many companies and universities represented here today when you think about the diversity of endpoints that are connected into these complex networks. So if you look on the left, you know, the world in some ways was quite predictable and quite straightforward when it was based just around mobile. Mobile has fast life cycles, is based on standards. There are large international committees that actually agree on protocols and APIs. This is completely absent to date in IoT and represents an enormous collaboration opportunity to agree on APIs and the best practice ways to connect these devices. Another thing to remember is that all endpoints are not created equal, and then there's a caveat. So if you start from the bottom and go to the top, of course, a connected refrigerator or an appliance may look benign from a security attack perspective. However, even those devices represent through, for example, a home gateway, a potentially devastating open ability to take over control in your home. If you go up the stack to applications that may be autonomous or even driver-driven vehicles or factories, the exploit of those endpoints and the security of keys that are involved in making decisions have an extreme amount of value. This has already been mentioned today. I find it fascinating, hard, but also an interesting opportunity to balance sometimes this tremendous contradiction in requirements. Compared to mobile or consumer electronics, which have a relatively fast life cycle where they're thrown away or they're replaced on a regular basis, or the PC industry, where there's a rich, well-understood life cycle upgrade process where collaborations between companies like Microsoft and Intel and others ensure that firmware and BIOS and things, everything just works. Of course, realize that none of that infrastructure is in place in IoT, and yet we're trying to secure things that are extremely important, and sometimes we have very, very limited budget in order to do so. So can we fix it all? Of course we can't fix it all, but over time, the market will mature, standards will emerge, a priori applications and APIs will come up, and there's a lot we can do in the meantime. So how do we mitigate some of these cost imbalances? First, we've got to reduce the cost of security. If the cost of security is low, it's much more likely to be used. Second, we need to prioritize based on a security analysis. Really understanding what the threat attack surface is for these devices is extremely important. And finally, a complete and scalable solution from chip to cloud is really required. So this takes companies with very diverse skill sets, deeply embedded skill sets where the semiconductor device design and chip ensures the storage and injection of secrets that are going to be managed during the life cycle. Device attestation, there's certainly a growing interest geopolitically to ensure that the actual national domestic supply of a device can be attested to and used throughout its life cycle. And finally, we have to protect the service availability throughout its life cycle. So how do we do this turnkey? Certainly one way to do it is to exploit semiconductor cores or keys that are injected during manufacturing. That's certainly not always the case, so we have to exploit the highest level of security that's available. It could be a low-end MCU, it could be a high-end multi-core SoC, but in general, we have to exploit some level of secret to cryptographically secure that link. On the cloud side, we've chosen in particular to be quite agnostic. to the platform as a service, to the vertical applications, and ensure that the security layer is looked at in a horizontal manner. So I've said before that the embedded security is really diverse and complex. We have lots of different non-volatile memory to consider. There are many different TEEs, or trusted execution environments, that are in use. Many of them provide no real hardware separation from trusted and untrusted applications. That continues to be a challenge in a resource-constrained device. The device ID and key storage has to be maintained sometimes for many years in the field and used to supply these links and improve the quality of the data. And finally, we have to make it easy to use. If it's too hard to use and too expensive, it won't be used, and we'll continue to see a rise in security breach. So one way to do that is to actually provide SDKs or software development kits that ensure that we can exploit a huge diversity of devices that are either in deployment or in design now. Certainly an opportunity for both startups and large multinationals as well. So if we do that, it's certainly possible to provide a platform that ensures secure connectivity, high degree of certainty for device attestation. And if you do this, you can enable governments, NGOs, startups, and companies to exploit for the agricultural vertical, for a healthcare vertical, for an industrial vertical, for a transportation vertical, lots and lots of interesting applications and services. But it's only if you can trust the data and the autonomy of the decisions that you enable throughout. So again, 2 key points, and this IoT is this very ambidextrous world where we have to protect the device. We don't want an adversary to take over control of that device. We also have to protect the high availability of a service that is running up on a cloud. If we do that correctly with the service, we can protect both sides. This is just a graphical example of what a dashboard might look like with many devices under control. This happens to be a demonstration of controlling and securing a large number of IP cameras internationally, where we can revoke the ability of that camera to be on the network. We can install a new certificate. We can check what level of semiconductor security is involved in the chips that are made in that camera. And each of these verticals, each of these startups could well customize the visualization of that data. So automotive, this could be a whole talk in and of itself, and I'm sure there are others in the audience that are experts in the automotive industry, not just the autonomous driving vehicle, but if you look at the number of critical secure devices that depend on secure firmware being updated to the car, it's rising very, very rapidly. One could certainly look at the automotive industry as a large, more safety standards-based ecosystem that's in IoT. It's a connected vehicle. You can take over that vehicle and do bad things with it. An insurance company might want to attest to the authenticity of log files that are filed during battery charging for warranty purposes, for the actual device ID of an airbag that was not produced properly and under recall. So the value of the data to control the safety and security of that system is extremely complex. And again, it's just a microcosm or system of IoT as we've discussed here this morning. So I said we needed to talk ecosystemically. And certainly this is one example that introduces many, many different business models. And I'm sure there will be discussions with the investor panel and other opportunities during the day to talk about all of the different units of commerce or the business models that are made possible by either securing a service, providing a chip, or providing key management services. One of the things we've done at Rambus is reach out and to start build de facto standards and partnerships and collaborations, and maybe we'll be able to start some new ones here during this conference. Our long-term partner Qualcomm has embraced our technology for years now. We've provisioned billions of A-class SoC chips with security and are rolling out a rather robust lifecycle management process with them. We've recently partnered with Synopsys as they reach a lot of the industry because we're a small company compared to many represented here today. It's important for us to collaborate and partner to reach as many diverse endpoints as possible to affect the security of an IoT system. ST Microelectronics, a little company you may or may not have heard of that's kind of coming back to life, if you will. The CA companies, the certificate authority companies, are seeing some rebirth of interest in providing secure device certificates. And an example, I took this slide from Cybertrust, that's a part of SoftBank Technologies, headquartered in Japan. We've partnered with them to deploy our services and our embedded security solutions at the edge to go about promoting, at this time in the Japanese market, an ability to start up-leveling the security and the lifecycle tracking of device certificates and security for automotive, for industrial, and for wearables. So these things are happening. One of the parts of my title was making it real. I think one of the big things that's changed over the last year is rather than lots of staff meetings about how much this is going to cost or convincing engineers that it's actually worth working on these hard problems, we're actually seeing deployments, we're seeing demos, we're seeing pilots, and the challenge over the next year, I think, is illustrated in part in this slide. I'll end here by just saying this is simply a way to segment the layers of the IoT stack on the vertical axis and look at the life cycle of IoT management on the horizontal axis and look at places where we need to introduce hardware roots of trust. Could be from an HSM running secure firmware, could be a cryptographically secure core built in or designed into the chip from the very beginning, could be a level of certificate signing later in that device lifecycle process, but it requires collaboration at each of these interfaces, an agreement on APIs, and an agreement that the whole industry needs to collaborate with some minimum level of expectations for keeping the networks solid, whatever frequency or whatever protocol they're used to actually communicate, and starting to connect the incredibly diverse semiconductor industry, which is out there putting endpoints that are sensing the physical world and converting those sensor data into the digital world, where the rich field of analytics and analysis can be made to really help improve resource allocation, public infrastructure, and hopefully a better life for us all. So with that, I'll end with just a picture to say IoT security is not just a remote concept in the factory, but is alive and well in your home. There have certainly been some high-profile cases where people have been able to hack in and look at cameras in your own home. So let's all work together to make that problem go away, or at least mitigate it by using best practices. Thanks for your time, and have a great conference.
So I think we have time for a couple of questions for Dr. Martin. Anybody? We have the mic. Yes, please. Any questions? Sensor to cloud IoT security.
Just got to do it.
You gotta do it. Exactly.
And it's hard.
So great. I think Dr. Scott, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, one question.
Yeah.
So is it a myth or is it really a reality? But he claimed so, right?
With enough time and enough money, nothing is hack-proof. I'll go on record. Seriously, I think my whole notion of looking at security, it's a continuum of how much value is available to an adversary and how well funded and what are the motivations for the adversary to actually break the hardware. Clearly, we have a strong sense, and if you've heard us talk before, we have a very strong bias for hardware roots of trust designed early in the design lifecycle. I think that's a great best practice, but there is nothing that is cryptographically 100% hack-proof. Balancing the cost and investment in time versus the value of the data you're trying to protect is really the art and science of security in my mind. Great question.
In the past, you were secure till you were hacked.
There you go.
So I would like to just invite Dr. Sandeep Garg to come on stage and give a token of appreciation to Dr. Scott. please. Please, center, please.